Meanwhile, millions of Vietnamese have lost their jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining us live from Ho Chi Minh City, here's Chriselle Lacuna. Hello, Chriselle.
Hi, Alma. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good to see you.
Right. You too. Okay, so let's hear the latest from Vietnam. Firstly, to update our recent numbers of cases of coronavirus in Vietnam, it is still at 270 infected. 45 are still active, and 225 were recovered from the disease. And so far, no fatality has been recorded. So let's go to our first headline. That is 5 million workers and 84.8% of companies affected by COVID-19 pandemic in Vietnam. The General Statistics Office of Vietnam said on Friday an estimated of 5 million workers and nearly 85% of companies in the country were negatively affected by the novel coronavirus disease pandemic in the first quarter of 2020. Of those affected, 59% are temporarily out of work, 28% are taking turns to work, and the remaining 13% have lost their jobs. Turbulence was observed in the Vietnamese labor market in quarter one of 2020 and the first 4 months of 2020, according to the Population of Labor Statistics Department under GSO. The employment rate plummeted to a 5-year low due to the impacts of COVID-19, which started in January. The 3 opening months of 2020 saw the average worker in Vietnam earns about 6.2 million, or equivalent to 264.7 US dollars monthly. That's the average wage here. The GSO report was compiled from the results of a survey on 131,000 businesses, as well as COVID-19 impact reports from 59 provinces and cities in Vietnam. It found that nearly 5 million wage earners in Vietnam had either lost their jobs or been furloughed because of the COVID-19 pandemic by mid-April. Among them, 1.2 million people were in the manufacturing and processing industry, 1.1 million worked in retail and commerce, and 740,000 were in hospitality. So, Alma, that resulted to 84.8% of the surveyed businesses said they are suffering due to COVID-19, and large and medium-sized companies were considered more vulnerable to the current pandemic than the small and very small businesses. 67% of the surveyed enterprises said they had resorted to layoffs, furloughs, and wage cuts to cope with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, Vietnam recorded a GDP growth of 3.82% in quarter one of 2020, but still is the lowest in the decade. But we are happy that still a positive change. But because we all know Vietnam is growing its economy exponentially, so we recorded 3.8 growth of the GDP for the first quarter of 2020. Let's go to headline number 2. So in relation to our news yesterday about Vietnam opposing China's establishing of 2 districts in Sansha City, experts say that China's ploy to weaponize COVID-19 in the East Vietnam Sea gains unsuccessful. In Vietnam, the South China Sea is known as their East Sea, while in our counterpart in our country, it's the West Philippine Sea. Now we've seen publications also from Inquirer.net that for the whole world it is to fight for the current pandemic, but it is business as usual for China. Singaporean analyst and researcher Colin Koh Swee Lin said that Beijing is simply exploiting ASEAN countries' preoccupation with the pandemic in the hope that its actions will provoke little or no reaction, thereby further strengthening its hold in the South China Sea. Now, Alma, just to summarize the timeline of events about this controversial issue about these islands, These are all from a publication of Toi Tre, or the Youth Journal of Vietnam. So last July 2019, the Hayang DG-8, it is a vessel. It first entered in Vietnam's exclusive economic zone in the southern area of the East Vietnam Sea and appeared to be conducting seismic and geological survey in there. And then from then on, they've been entering the area illegally, and they are operating. And on October 3, the Vietnamese Foreign Ministry announced that the group of ships had expanded their operation range and within Vietnam's exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. And then on April 2 this year, a Vietnamese fishing boat was sunk by a Chinese Coast Guard vessel near Vietnam's Hoang Sa, or Paracel Island archipelago. All of the fishermen on board were eventually rescued. And on April 19, Vietnam strongly denounced China's establishment of the so-called Sisha and Nansha districts and called on to reverse its wrongful decisions and respect Vietnam's sovereignty over the Paracel and Spratly Islands. Lin also said China's game plan is to continue to harass new oil and gas exploration and all fishing activities by its neighbors until it becomes too risky and expensive for Southeast Asian civilians and governments to do anything without China's approval. There is opportunity, however, for Vietnam, because Vietnam is this year's ASEAN chair, to build a consensus with ASEAN about how to respond to the growing US-China competition. That will be a major competition to the ASEAN. Alma?
So earlier we reported on the millions of jobs lost due to COVID-19. You also ended the social isolation guidelines at the end of April 22, though some restrictions, like other countries, are still in place, especially with high-risk areas. So how is the government addressing this millions of jobs lost due to the coronavirus?
So far, the majority of the businesses were reopened already. So we will expect a gradual normalization of the situation in here.
What about commercial and or international flights, international local flights? Has it been is it back already?
Not yet, but major airlines offered their flights already. However, they discourage the passengers to, when transiting to a third country, that not them to enter the country anymore, because they may be subject to quarantine.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Chriselle, for all that update. And we'll see you soon. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. You too. From ABC Vietnam Bureau, this is Chriselle Yapuna. We'll live in interesting times.